One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This is the Two Cats, One Dog podcast.
Yes, the Two Cats, One Dog podcast, a truly distasteful radio program that covers true tales of the strange, morbid, and paranormal. These men should be removed from the airways and should not be heard or taken seriously in any way. What you are about to hear may disturb you.
I just want to be pure.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Two Cats, One Dog podcast. My name is Daniel Martin. To my right is Jeffrey Lee.
Hi.
To his right is Ethan the dog, Kern.
Ruff, ruff.
Woof woof. And then over in the hot seats is Mason the Thinnest McGinnis. Say hi to your friends, Mason.
Hello. How's it going, friends?
And today we are continuing our RePilot with part 2 of our S-tier serial killers. Last week we left off with Ted Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, and Sam Little. This week, let's get into our next pick for S-tier, Ed Gein. Like Zodiac, he didn't get this high pick because of his numbers, but because of the sheer amount of horror he inspired with his ghoulish behavior. One man, 1,000 nightmares. Ed Gein is the man who inspired films such as Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, and most notably the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. And let me point out, as we learn more about his background and crimes, this man was not some cunning killer, nor an intellectual cannibal, and definitely not a 6'20" chainsaw-wielding maniac. No, he was a grave-robbing, mom-centric dullard who would probably forget to breathe if his body didn't do it for him. And it's not a crime to be dumber than a box of rocks, but it is a crime to desecrate corpses, shoot people with rifles, and collect human nipples for your belts. He's got some issues. He's got problems. He's got range. The man's got range.
He does.
So Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27th, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin, to Augusta Wilhelmine and George Philip Gein. And if you've ever seen Pearl with Mia Goth, the mom in that movie is basically Augusta. She's cruel, overbearing, and so much holier than thou. He had one older brother, Henry, and grew up in the sticks under the thumb of his mother. Augusta was cold, extremely religious, and a strict person who imposed a rigid moral code on her sons. The Code of Gein. To horrify, stupefy, and gross out the competition. Augusta was a devout old Lutheran who believed that the world was inherently sinful and that all women except herself were instruments of the devil. She conducted daily Bible readings with her sons, focusing on passages about death, divine retribution, and the immorality of women. To protect her sons from the perceived immorality of society, Augusta moved the family to a secluded 195-acre farm in Plainfield. I think it's actually 155. I think I misdid that. In Plainfield, Wisconsin in 1915. The infamous house where Ed Gein's gruesome creations would be discovered. She prohibited Ed and his brother Henry from leaving the property except to attend school and discouraged any form of social interaction. So at least they weren't homeschooled. Shout out to my ex, my buddy Stoby, and all my other homeschooled homies out there. We see you. Attempts by Ed to make friends were met with scolding and punishments, reinforcing his social isolation and dependence on his mother. His father, George Gein, was a drunk who struggled to maintain consistent employment. He worked intermittently as a carpenter, tanner, and salesman, and not a tanner like the 20-year-old girls that work at the tanning booths, but like tanning like leathers and stuff. Yeah.
How do you know it wasn't both? He could have been getting.
I think he was getting a little tan on. I think he had a touch of the brown going on.
Going just to get a good base.
Outside a lot. He had to have at least like a farmer's.
He even owned a local grocery store where they sold used human feet and pickled testicles. Just kidding. But I couldn't find the name of the grocery store. I think it was just called like the La Crosse grocery store. But they did have 2 locations, one on Charles Street and another on Calodina Street. Augusta basically ran the operations, but the business was sold sometime before the family left for Plainfield in 15. This is all to say that George was struggling to provide for the family and additionally was an ineffective parent, which led to a dynamic where their mother was the man of the house. And if we can do a quick picture for our visual audience, this lady was a handsome woman. Pull up a picture of Augusta Gein, please.
Augusta Gein?
Jamie, pull that up. Pull that shit up.
You got it.
Augusta Gein. Let's see her. I'm telling you, dude, this lady, like, you look into her eyes, you can almost kind of see it. You know, she's got some kind of gaze, dude.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Make it big for us. Make it big.
I'm trying. I'm working on that eye.
Look at those eyes, dude. You get lost in there. You get lost in there, man.
Yeah, I don't know which one to look
It's
at.
mesmerizing. I don't know which one to look at.
She's got a
Like, which eye do I look at when I'm trying to make eye contact with you?
She would yell at you for a comment like that. She'd be spanking your ass.
Bro,
dude.
she'd probably eat my face.
Augusta's parenting style was marked by emotional manipulation and favoritism. She viewed George as weak and worthless and projected this disdain onto her sons, often verbally abusing them and predicting they would become failures just like their father. Despite this, Ed idolized Augusta, viewing her as a pure and moral figure. This unhealthy dynamic fostered an intense, almost Oedipal attachment to his mother, with Ed striving to meet her standards and maintain her approval like a little puppy. As we mentioned, the family did move to a large 155-acre farm in Plainfield after the sale of their grocery stores. George continued to struggle with employment while Augusta ran the house and farm. Here, Gein and company became more and more isolated as their mother ran almost every aspect of their day-to-day lives. And I have to imagine, like just taking a shit, you had to have permission. It's like, oh, it was not time to take a shit, but you did it. Now you're punished.
Now you eat the poop.
Now you eat the poop.
Now you eat the poop.
Now you eat
Yeah, well,
stuff.
Augusta, you're gonna tell me Augusta Wilhelmine is not like she's got to be Australian or Austrian or German, not Austrian.
I think she's actually
Australian.
She's
mate.
actually a Kiwi.
She's
then,
from
mate.
Wendigo, mate. Ed was to come right home from school and was to not socialize with anyone, especially stinky, dirty little girls. He was 9 years old when they moved and attended the Plainfield public school system, where he was said to have been quiet, soft-spoken, and isolated. That was until age 15, he dropped out before high school, never finishing his education. With his brother, Henry, working alongside him on the farm, Ed's life was quiet, with few social interactions beyond his domineering mother, who continued to shape his worldview. Augusta's influence was overwhelming. She instilled in Ed an extremely religious doctrine, emphasizing the inherent evil of women and their role in the downfall of men. As we all know, the downfall of men happened early in the 1900s, obviously to women.
Everything was taken.
Yeah, everything was taken. We've been rebuilding since. According to Augusta, sex was a sin and women were temptresses who led men astray. These beliefs deeply affected Ed's psyche, leaving him with a warped view of relationships, sexuality, and women. During the late 1920s and early 1930s, Ed's life consisted mainly of farm work and the occasional odd job in Plainfield. He never developed any meaningful relationships with others. His mother's teachings led him to believe that interactions with women were dangerous and sinful, so he kept to himself, living a lonely existence. In the early 1930s, Ed began to help neighbors with various tasks, including cleaning barns and doing maintenance work. He was generally seen as a shy, awkward man with a strange demeanor. By the mid-1930s, Ed had started working for local farmers, earning a small income doing labor, but he remained a recluse, often shying away from any social contact. During that time, it's believed that his obsession with death began to grow, although there was no confirmed criminal activities at this time. There's even some sources that suggest Gein, because of his seemingly docile demeanor and childlike mind, was a great babysitter that locals would sometimes call on for a last-minute stitch, which would be almost as ironic as Ted Bundy operating a suicide hotline.
Yeah.
We got to keep these ghouls off of the streets, you guys. Away from the phone lines, away from the internet, away from our children. It just got to stop. We just keep giving them unfettered access to our most vulnerable people in our society. It's absolutely crazy.
Here you go, little guy. Made you a rattle. It's full of teeth.
I like death.
Don't ask where I got it wrong.
You want to come see my dead turtle in the backyard? That's fucking Ed Gein.
It's all to do with the medulla oblongata.
So by the 1940s, Ed's mental state had continued to deteriorate, likely exacerbated by his ongoing isolation and the increasingly controlling nature of his relationship with Augusta. On April 1st, 1940, Gein's father died of heart failure at age 66. The death of his father, however, had little impact on Ed's daily life, as his father had been largely an absent figure. But only a few years later, in 1944, do we see something sinister bubble up. On May 16th, 1944, Gein was burning away marsh vegetation on the property when the fire got out of control, drawing the attention of the local fire department. By the end of the day, the fire had been extinguished and the firefighters had gone, but Gein reported Henry missing. With lanterns and flashlights, a search party tried to find 43-year-old Henry, whose dead body was then found lying face down. Apparently, Henry had been dead for some time, and it appeared that the cause of death was heart failure since he had not been burned or injured otherwise. It was later reported by biographer Harold Shetler that Henry had bruises on his head. Police dismissed the possibility of foul play, and the county coroner later officially listed asphyxiation as the cause of death. The authorities accepted the accident theory, but no official investigation was conducted and an autopsy was never performed. Questioning Gein about the death of Bernice Worden in 1957, state investigator Joe Wilimowski brought up questions about Henry's death. George Arndt, who studied the George, you got George R. and George Arndt, and who do you want to be in this life? George Arndt studied the case, wrote that in retrospect, it's possible and likely that Henry's death was the Cain and Abel aspect of this case. And with Henry now deceased, Ed and Augusta were now alone. Augusta had a paralyzing stroke shortly after Henry's death, and Ed devoted himself to taking care of her 24/7. Sometime in 1945, he later recounted he and his mother visited a man named Smith who lived nearby to purchase straw. According to Ed, Augusta witnessed Smith beating a dog. A woman inside the Smith residence came outside and yelled for him to stop, but Smith beat the dog to death. Augusta was extremely upset by the scene. However, what bothered her did not appear to be the brutality that was displayed towards this dog, rather the presence of an unmarried woman.
Yep.
That's a real problem.
You gotta get the whores off the
You
streets.
do. Yeah,
We
the
do.
dog's fine. Beat the dog to death, but get that harlot out of your house,
no
sir.
thoughts.
Horrific
Too many thoughts out here.
Too many
horrific-
bad thoughts.
Fucking swarming
Deplorable
in 'em.
violence is okay as long as nobody says any bad words.
As long as, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like the concept of American movies, too. I mean, violence is totally fine, but you can't have titties.
Yeah.
It's so whack.
Tell that to Airplane, one of the best movies.
Yeah,
ever
but
made.
that was before they fucked up the rating system, because that should not have been a PG movie with the titties.
It should have been.
It should have been. You're right. Augusta told Ed that the woman was not married to Smith and so had no business being there, and angrily called her Smith's harlots. She had a second stroke soon after, and her health deteriorated rapidly. Augusta died on December 29th, 1945, at the age of 67. Ed was devastated, to say the least, by her death, and in the words of Shetler, he had lost his only friend and one true love, which is just insane. He was absolutely alone in this world now. And it's just crazy that she stroked out, not from watching a dog get beat to death, but because she saw an unmarried woman in this man's house and was like, her prudish mind just couldn't take it anymore. But again, the dog getting beat to death is totally fine. He held on to the farm and earned money from doing odd jobs. He boarded up the rooms used by his mother, including the upstairs, downstairs parlor, and living room, leaving them untouched, while the rest of the house became increasingly squalid. These rooms remained pristine. Gein lived thereafter in a small room next to the kitchen. Around this time, he became interested in reading pulp magazines and adventure stories, particularly those involving cannibals or Nazi atrocities. And what's interesting here is he's probably reading a little bit of L. Ron Hubbard's stuff at this time, because he was a really popular pop fiction author at this time. He was particularly interested in cannibals or Nazi atrocities, specifically concerning Ilse Koch, who selected tattooed prisoners for death in order to fashion lampshades and other items from their skins. So he had a fixation on that guy specifically. And he received a farm subsidy from the federal government starting in 1951. So he occasionally worked for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing crews in the Plainfield area. Sometime between 46 and 56, he had also sold an 80-acre parcel of the land that Henry had owned. Without Augusta to direct his life, Ed retreated further into his warped fantasies, becoming obsessed with death and the human body. During these years, Ed began to exhume corpses from local cemeteries, seeking to collect body parts that he could use in his increasingly bizarre attempts to create a woman's suit. So it's kind of like Iron Man. I mean, this is like a real American hero kind of story here, from rags to riches. You know, he was doing it in a fucking and a graveyard at night with a box of scraps. He believed that by wearing the skin and organs of these women, he could transform into his mother in some twisted sort of form of resurrection. Yeah,
That's
pretty
fucking
good.
wild.
Pretty
So you're
good,
telling
right?
me
Yes.
he wanted to be a woman.
Yeah, he just needed a little. He needed a little bit of hormone therapy.
Yeah,
He might have
yeah.
been
Some
okay.
goddamn
And what's fucked up is I
black
think
voodoo
you
magic.
might not even be completely far off that he might have been a willing candidate for like a hormonal or transition therapy. But I also do think there was that connection to death and dismemberment that was also there that I don't think was ever going
I
to
don't
be.
know about
Oh,
that.
yeah, no.
Yeah,
that's-
I don't know, but I do think it's interesting that you brought. I think that it was funny. It was not only funny, but also
He wanted to
educational.
transform into a woman. I'm like, all right.
He wanted
well,
to transform into a fucking
But sure, let me
zombie.
let me chop your arms off too. you
yeah.
know?
He chopped it all off, dude.
Oh man.
So, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is where we're going to get into his first and last kills and all the gross shit he got into and the time in between.
I got a couple good things. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Save it. I'm just warning everybody right now. That means you, little guys. I'm warning you right now that we are entering whiskey ginger territory. This is our trigger warning to you. So Ed's first confirmed kill occurred in 1954 when he murdered Mary Hogan, owner of Hogan's Tavern in Pine Grove, just one town over from Plainfield. She disappeared from work the night of December 8th, 1954, with only a spent .32 caliber cartridge and some bloodstains at the scene. And we know that Ed killed her because he confessed to the murder, but that wasn't until his arrest 4 years later, and no suspects had been charged in the meantime. I'd be surprised if he wasn't like a person of interest, as he was somewhat a regular patron over there, and he had an infatuation with Mary Hogan, but police never made the official connection during that time. And we don't know exactly what went down that night when he killed her, but we know that she was a target of Gein's because of the contrast Mary held to Augusta. So Mary was this loud, brash, obnoxious woman. She was also very independent and strong, and she had her own tavern, where Augusta was very reserved and obviously the complete opposite of all those things. She kind of represented the black to her white.
Yeah, she was a bodacious babe.
She was, she was. And you got pictures of her?
Boisterous.
What
What
was
do
her
you got?
name again?
Mary Hogan.
Mary Hogan.
Ooh, that's nice and big. Yeah, that's good.
Pretty scary, to be honest with you.
She's. Are you saying she deserved? Are you saying she deserved to get killed by
What
Ed
the
Gein?
fuck did you? How the hell did you insinuate that?
That was an odd dot to connect.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ! There you go. All right,
It's a
there
good
we go.
picture. She's a brooding woman, and she did not, despite Mason thinking this horrible stuff, she did not.
Dan,
deserve
shut the
to
fuck
die.
up.
She did
Mason
not have it
tells you.
coming,
God!
no matter what he
No
says.
matter what you think you've heard.
So it was later discovered that Ed had kept her head as a memento, which he had decapitated and preserved. A few years later, on November 16th, 1957, Ed gets himself arrested at the Plainfield grocery store following the most obvious murder on the planet, that of 58-year-old hardware store owner Bernice Warden. So, and before we get into the details, it might seem like we're jumping the shark here, going from his first kill to his last one like this, but it's only because Ed is only confirmed to kill these two people.
Yeah, it's true.
It's only these two women, Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan. And it's only after his second kill that police unveil all of these gruesome activities that our protagonist has been up to. And because of the time this happened, a time before forensics, CCTV, or anything remotely like that, we only have what police found at his property and what he said in court to work with. Moreover, not to say he was completely stupid, because I think that might have been a bit disingenuous of me earlier, he was found to have been legally insane, which makes it extremely hard to get exact details of his crimes for a pretty timeline like we normally like to paint. So it was early November 16th, 1957, when Gein goes into the Warden hardware store to refill a jug of antifreeze, which is something that people used to do back in the day. There is some kind of dispute between Ed and Mary, the owner, and following the dispute, Ed leaves but returns with a rifle and shoots Bernice from a close distance. He took the whole ass cash register, Mary's now lifeless body, and fled back to his farm with them. Unfortunately for him, Mary's son, Frank Warden, was the town deputy who quickly put the pieces together once he found a bloodstain on the counter of the hardware store, a missing register, and a receipt for the antifreeze with Gein's name on it. A warrant,
Wow.
yeah, it's just so fucking obvious. A warrant was issued for his arrest, where he was later apprehended at the local grocery store in late evening. Later that night is when Gein's farm was finally searched by the law. What they found was disturbing. Something you would only expect to see in a B-roll horror film, but it was all very real. The FBI was called in for this shortly after the local authorities realized they were a bit over their heads on this one. There were skulls mounted on posts, chairs made from human skin, bowls crafted from human skulls, which is lazy and uninspired in my opinion. Ed had even fashioned a women's suit, as we mentioned earlier. Let's go through a more detailed list of what exactly was found at the deteriorating property. All right, guys, you ready for this? Strap in here.
This
Strap
is
in.
crazy. I haven't. Oh.
4 human noses, whole human bones and fragments, a waste basket made of human skin, skulls on bedposts, a corset made from a female torso, skin from shoulder to waist, leggings made from human skin. And this is before Lululemon started putting all those garbage products out there. So he's a trendsetter.
What the fuck?
So he's Hydrox.
Yes, he is the Hydrox of Lululemon.
Yeah.
He absolutely is. He made the good product first. Masks made from the facial skin of women. A belt made from human female nipples, 9 to be exact. A pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, which was recreated for the original Texas Chainsaw movie posters.
I feel like 9 nipples would make a small belt.
I
Yeah,
think
I
you
was
got to space them
You know
out.
what I'm saying?
You got to space them out the right way.
Yeah,
you can't just
maybe.
put nipple,
Unless they're
nipple,
just
nipple,
really
nipple.
big
You need to go
nipples.
nipple.
Yeah, instead of the
little
bottle
bit.
Yeah,
caps.
but if
Nipple.
it's
Yeah,
made
exactly.
out
Yeah.
of nipples, in like
I do think he was probably building to maybe a better one. That
Maybe.
was probably his prototype.
Yeah.
That was
Because
his
I would need
prototype.
at least.
That was like
probably
Iron Man's
25.
first. Iron Man's first suit wasn't perfect either.
That's true. I would probably need like 25 nipples, 30 nipples.
I would comfortably. I would say probably 25 to
Yeah.
35 to work with. Gloves made from human skin. A lampshade made from the human face, also in the movie. 9 vulvas in a box.
that's
Yeah, that's fucked.
9
they're all
vulvas in a
fucked,
box.
but there's something weird about that one.
Just that one.
Just that one.
They're all weird, but that one.
Mary Hogan's face in a paper bag and her skull in a box. Police also found fingernails, preserved heads, and other anatomical parts in various containers. Some remains were painted, others treated in crude preservation methods. They also found Bernice's decapitated body hanging in a shed, dressed and gutted in a manner similar to how wild game is processed. Her head was found in a sack, and her other body parts were later recovered. Ed also admitted to having exhumed the bodies of at least 9 women, most of whom were recently buried in the local cemetery. He confessed to digging up graves, especially those of women who resembled his mother, and bringing the bodies back to his farm for grotesque rituals. The exact number of Ed's victims remains unclear, but it's suspected that his criminal activity could have extended further, with some suggesting there were other victims, though there's no definitive proof exists for more than just the 2 he was charged with. Victims like missing 8-year-old girl Georgia Jean Weckler from Fort Atkinson, his brother Henry, Evelyn Gracie Harley, 14, from La Crosse.
That was about to get real fucking crazy.
Yeah, I know. Victor Harold Travis, 42, from Adams County, and James Walsh, 32, neighbor of Gein in Plainfield. All people that went missing that could have been connected to him.
Gotcha.
When Ed was arrested in November of 1957, he was initially charged with just the murder of Bernice Warden. Authorities later discovered the full extent of his crimes, including the disturbing nature of his body snatching and the horror of the preserved body parts he had kept. He had confessed to both this murder and the murder of Mary Hogan, as we mentioned earlier. During his interrogation, Ed claimed that he had never killed anyone for the purpose of violence or hatred. No, he would never do that. Rather, he saw his actions as an attempt to reconnect with his mother, who he believed has been the only person who truly understood him. What a poor little baby. He also expressed that he had been following her teachings and had only been driven by an obsession with recreating her through the bodies of others. He was found guilty of the crimes, but deemed insane and not fit to stand trial, which was and continues to be an extremely rare verdict. He spent the rest of his days in the care of Mendota Mental Health Institute in Madison, Wisconsin, where he died at the ripe old age of 77 from lung cancer. His gravesite is in Plainfield, but is unmarked and unknown. The infamous farm on Nakusa Road was set for auction following his arrest, but actually burned down in March of 1958, just months later. When Gein learned of the news, all he said is, "Just as well." This site is now privately owned and is said to be all woods and dirt now, and that no structures exist from the Gein family. There's also no public access. That is Ed Gein, everyone, the OG body snatcher, the butcher of Plainfield. I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but I think he admitted to over 40 instances of grave robbing and had many pieces of remains that belonged to over dozens of human bodies. He was as ghoulish as they come, and his impact on American culture is still felt today through those movie franchises we talked about. And I'm pretty sure there's actually, speaking of which, I'm pretty sure a new Ed Gein like monster docuseries in the works. The people that made the Mendez brothers and the Dahmer one. So I think we could finally have a way to fully sympathize with him. This misunderstood, totally chill, misunderstood person. What do you got for us over there, Jamie? Young Mason.
There's a couple of things that were on here on that list that you were talking about.
Yeah,
there was a lampshade that was made from the human face.
Yeah, we said that.
Oh, you did?
Yep. You just fucking missed it.
All right.
You
I
piece
guess
of
I'm gonna
shit.
go fuck myself.
Yeah,
then.
good. So do.
Pair of lips on a like a window shade.
Yep, we
pole.
talked about that.
That's cool.
Yeah, I did like that. I think that's innovative.
Yeah.
So Bernice Warden's heart was located in a plastic bag in front of Gein's Potbelly stove, as well.
I mean, that's where you keep those kind of things.
Yeah,
for
no
being
doubt.
honest.
Her face was in a paper bag.
Yeah, we said that.
Okay.
There were 9 vulvas in a shoebox.
9 vulvas in a shoebox.
What do you guys think about that? By
You
the
could
way?
make
What do you think you could do
like
with
a
that?
counting book. With
I was kind of yeah,
Four.
like
4 bowls.
4
TM, trademark that. That's hot,
9
dude.
human nipples.
I honestly, it would be really funny just to release something like that. Obviously intended for adults, but like it's geared for kids. That would
Yeah.
be really funny.
The Ed
That's gonna be our
Gein-
first-
The Ed Gein numbers book.
Yeah. How you can learning numbers with Ed Gein. Do you got any other fun facts up there? Any cool picks?
You know, you actually covered a lot of it, but
I did. I'm very
apparently
thorough.
he was
Very thorough.
He was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
I didn't
He
see
was
that.
found mentally incompetent.
Yeah, we couldn't
so
stand
he was
trial.
unfit for trial. Yep. You know, there was you really covered a lot of this. So
When did he die?
he died
I covered that too. Remember he died at
He
77?
died
July
at 77, but I went.
July 26,
Oh,
1984.
84. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
fuck you.
So is this
the
post?
day after my birthday.
So this must have
You were
been.
born in
You're
84?
Fucking 84.
No,
I was gonna
no,
say,
but
what?
July. Oh, Jesus Christ!
So this
All
must
right.
have been
So
before.
you're fucking shit. That makes you like what? Like what are you 40? Are you fucking 40? You're
Yeah.
41.
I'm 41.
Damn, you
He's
old bitch.
141 actually.
I'm fucking 40.
What were you saying, Lee?
Oh, was this before Reagan shut down all the mental health institutions?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
right
yeah.
before.
Must have been,
he
yeah.
might have
thought
been
that
one of
was
the ones to.
I think so. Yeah.
Fuck, dude, our video is so fuzzy looking. Why? Do you see that? Do you see what's happening? It's like flickering.
Yeah. What's up with that?
It's because it's a piece of shit. Sorry, everybody. Hey, this is a great time to advertise for Mevo Start cameras. Never fucking buy them. They're terrible.
Terrible.
And I will keep that in. I fucking hate these cameras. I really do. I wish I wouldn't have spent $900 on them to be horrible.
I don't know why the fuck they're so shitty.
They're
dude.
terrible, dude. They're terrible. All right, guys. I had the break written in for later, but I might pass out if we don't fucking.
We
got
gotta
to
take a
for
break.
a little bit.
Yeah,
so,
I'm
all right,
hot
yeah.
here.
let's come back to this. All right, now we're done.
Syntha, some phone.
Up in our up next in our S tier of American Psychos is everyone's favorite fat fucking drunk ass clown, John Wayne Gacy. My personal least favorite pick because of how insufferable his little piggy voice is, and you know the 30+ little boys stuffed into his crawl space.
Yeah, there's that too.
There's also that.
Yeah, kind of a turnoff.
Got some notes. And before we get too deep into Gacy Town, can we just take a moment to realize that a body count of 30+ is pretty intense. Now, we talked about Sam Little on the last episode. He had 93
Yeah, just putting
possible.
numbers.
He was putting up numbers. He's
Yeah.
putting up numbers on the board. But 30+ is still pretty heavy. That's pretty heavy. There's a few today that have topped, that in the series rather, that have topped the 20s and 30s. And that's so much labor. Like that is a lot of labor that's going on. Let's put a pin in that thought for now. And
But it's mostly
sorry.
kids, so there's not like a lot of
Oh my
heavy lifting
God.
involved. You know what I mean? So really, it's like like 14
It's like
grown
half.
adults.
Yeah, exactly. You could cut it in half,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
So, but I do think throughout all this, it's very possible, just put a pin in this thought that it's possible this man and others like him that have the high body counts might not have acted alone. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17th, 1942 in Chicago. Is that St. Patty's Day? Is it 17th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of Happy St. Patty's Day, we could say Happy John Wayne Gacy Day.
Yeah.
As a very
As an
Irish man,
Irish-
I am not fucking
Wait,
doing
you're from
that.
Ireland? He grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood with 2 sisters and a father who drank heavily and beat him frequently. His father's abuse left emotional scars that never healed. And though Gacy sought after his father's approval, he never received it. And saying his dad was abusive is kind of an understatement. I mean, right from birth, John Sr. wanted a strong, masculine boy, so he gave him the name John Wayne as a way to immediately bolster this image of an all-American tough guy. And by the way, John Wayne, the movie star, was actually a draft-dodging, art-loving creative whose real name was Marion Morrison, and quite literally all of that tough guy act you see on film is for the sake of his style and the film. So it's a facade. And one that John Sr. was immediately forcing on his child, and one that held John Jr. to an impossibly high standard, always leading to disappointment and anger from his father. Physically unwell as a child, Gacy suffered blackouts and was later diagnosed with a heart condition, which kept him from participating in sports and isolated him from his peers. And this pissed off John Sr. to no end. His kid was a pathetic loser that enjoyed feminine activities with his mother and long hospital stays. Of course, his father continued to abuse him physically and emotionally throughout his childhood and teen years while Gacy struggled with his identity and sexuality, like most kids do. But between the ages of 6 and 12, there were some highly inappropriate situations Gacy found himself in, and let's just say he was likely on both the giving and receiving end of sexual assault from family friends. And let's leave it there. It's important to note this, however, considering the sexual nature of his crimes later in life. Now, let's fast forward a bit here. In the late 50s, Gacy dropped out of high school, but eventually earned a degree from Northwestern Business College and began climbing the professional ladder, working as a salesman, then manager for a shoe company. In 1964, Gacy met and got engaged to Marilyn Myers and moved to Waterloo, Iowa, where he managed not 1, not 2, but 3 KFC restaurants. Now, these aren't Popeyes, but, we're kind of getting in the big leagues here. These were owned by his now father-in-law, and it now seemed that he had hit his stride in life. It was here in Iowa that Gacy and Marilyn tied the knot and had 2 children. Which is so sweet. And I think now is a good time to point out that Gacy, despite his troubled childhood, was an outwardly normal person. He was very eccentric, and some would argue he was charming and charismatic. I wouldn't argue that. I think he's an annoying fat fuck with a whiny voice and a bad attitude. Throughout his late teens and post-business school, Gacy did learn how to grease the wheels and network with people. He was almost like Carnegie-esque, how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
He was very good with this stuff. And I mean, in the sense that he was very personable. And he was the kind of guy to remember your name and details about your life. And if that wasn't enough, he used booze and drugs as a way to win people over as well. And that goes a long way with folks and can create a pretty loyal system of friends with seemingly strong bonds. We see this in the way he was able to maintain all of these relationships and host huge parties all the time and get people to cover and possibly even commit crimes with him. Moreover, he was kind of a classic old school party animal, late nights boozing it up and roughhousing with the boys, hard at work during the day, providing for the family, church on Sunday to wash away the sins of the week. Rinse and repeat, and you guys probably know exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. That were a lot more prevalent back in the day. These are now boomers and older people. But this is kind of what they acted like. This all comes back into play later. John Wayne Gacy was a well-networked gabber, which was probably his most dangerous quality. So let's kind of call that his Act 1 of his life, right? And then we're going to pick up on Act 2, the good years. I'm just kidding. It's about to get really fucking bad. Things were going a little too good for him, and in 1968, John Wayne Gacy was convicted of sodomy after luring a teenage boy to his home and sexually assaulting him. And Gacy was so convincing of his innocence that one of his KFC employees actually went to attack the victim to stop them from testifying. This, however, was unsuccessful, and Gacy was sentenced to 10 years. He only served 18 months due to being a model prisoner and was paroled in 1970. But just before his release on Christmas Day in 1969, John Sr. succumbed to cirrhosis of the liver. And for some reason, Gacy was devastated by this and thought maybe his sodomy charges were what actually killed him. Through the trial and jail stint, his wife did leave him as well and took the kids, and he was never given full custody of them again, so he returned to Chicago after his release and moved back in with his mother. But I just thought that was so I mean, he like was so hard on himself. He's like, oh, my sodomy charge must have got my father killed. It must have been the nail in the coffin. And I also don't know why he cared. Like, his dad was an abusive piece of shit, but I do understand that there's a lot more at play there.
Stockholm syndrome, baby.
And but he also didn't live with him at the time, so whatever. We'll push past that. So back in Chicago, Gacy appeared to reinvent himself. He started a construction company, PDM Contractors, and became an active in the community. Even started to get involved in local politics. He hosted neighborhood parties, performed as Pogo the Clown at hospitals, and guess what, boys? He got married again. Twice. Woo! On
Nice.
July 1st, I know, good for him. I haven't even been married once.
Right.
On July 1st, 1972, 2 short years after returning to Chicago for a fresh start, John Wayne Gacy marries Carol Hoff, an old high school flame. Carol had 2 daughters of her own, and Gacy had kids from his previous marriage, but did not have custody of them, as we mentioned earlier. The two would go on to have a rocky, mostly sexless marriage in which Gacy was rarely around and extremely emotionally closed off, but honestly, this was probably for the best. I mean, it's kind of just watching a car right next to you get smucked, and it's like, woof, that was close. However, it was just before the two tied the knot that Gacy got himself into trouble. Gacy's first known victim was Timothy McCoy, a 16-year-old whom Gacy picked up at a bus terminal in 1972. And this was in January. Gacy claimed McCoy accidentally entered his room with a knife, prompting him to kill him in self-defense. But this narrative doesn't really hold up under scrutiny, especially considering the patterns that followed. Gacy developed a chilling method. He would lure victims to his home with the promise of work, food, or shelter, and often he claimed to be a police officer or even used a fake badge to gain their trust. Once inside, he would use what's called his handcuff trick, pretending to perform a magic act. Once the victim was restrained, Gacy would say, "Hey, you know the trick? You gotta get the key," before revealing there was no escape. He would then sexually assault and murder them, usually by strangulation, often using a tourniquet-like device he called his rope trick, because he had his handcuff trick, and then he also had the rope trick, and the rope trick was for your neck mostly, but he would also do that on your wrist sometimes too. This guy, he's a big fat fucking idiot. He's like, hey, you want to come in here and watch some porno with me and jerk off and smoke some weed, and then maybe we could do a couple tricks together, just me and the boys? Cigarettes. Some of his victims were suffocated with cloths or ligatures. Many were kept captive for hours, even days. He told investigators that killing gave him a sense of ultimate control. Afterward, he typically stored the bodies in a crawl space beneath his home. When the crawl space filled, he began dumping victims in the nearby Des Plaines River. Despite the volume and frequency of the murders, Gacy had multiple close encounters with police that could have stopped him earlier, and here's a couple examples.
Holy fuck.
What?
Sorry, but he had an IQ of 118.
It's kind of stupid, isn't it?
No, that's high.
I thought that was like average.
No, 100's average.
100's average.
Yeah.
So 18's high?
They
It's
adjust
signifying
the IQ.
superior intelligence is what he says.
Well, I
but
mean,
that's
he clear.
pretty
That's what I was going to say. I was
fucking
like, I
high.
didn't think he was stupid. He's definitely not stupid.
No,
So that's-
well, 100.
I
is,
thought like 180 was like really smart. Like
yeah,
genius.
180 is they adjust the IQ rating like every so many years.
It always
because-
changes, yeah.
Well, because as a species, we keep becoming more and more intelligent.
Let's go through a quick close call list here. In 1975, a young man reported that Gacy tried to sexually assault him. The case wasn't pursued aggressively due to lack of evidence. In 76, the mother of Gregory Godzik, a 17-year-old employee of Gacy's, reported her son missing after he failed to return from work. Gacy told her that Gregory had run away and even claimed to have received a phone call from him. Police did little to follow up, and that was one of his victims. That same year, David Cram, another employee, was invited to live in Gacy's house. Gacy tried the handcuff trick on him, but Cram escaped and eventually moved out. Despite the suspicious behavior, it was never formally investigated. And what's funny with this case, and I didn't expand on it here, but actually he continued to live there for a little bit after.
Really?
Gacy tried the fucking trick on him, and he basically is like, you fucking fat idiot. I'm like, he was a young, fit man. Like, he just overpowered him really quick. He was like, no, we're not doing this. And then he just fucked off and went to his room. And Gacy was just sitting there like, well, what the fuck was that all about? You know, and they just continued to live together for like, I think another few weeks until he finally was like, I'm going to get out of here. It's getting a little not chill in this environment. But that does sound like kind of the best roommate. Like that didn't send him over. You could have done anything. And he would have been like, that's fine. You know, like a couple dishes in the sink. He's not going to freak out.
Not a problem.
Not a problem. In 1977, Jeffrey Rignall survived a brutal assault by Gacy. He reported that Gacy had abducted him, drugged him with chloroform, and tortured him before releasing him. Rignall led police to Gacy's home and even pointed him out in person. Although police confirmed Gacy's identity, the case was not pursued as a priority. Rignall's emotional state and the fact that he was a gay man during a time of deep societal prejudice may have affected the credibility of the accounts in the eyes of the investigators. And kind of like with Dahmer, who we'll get to in a little bit, and it ties in with the less dead theory that we've talked about. Gay people were included in this at this time.
Yeah.
Less dead, they were less dead. Each time, authorities either believed Gacy's story or failed to act aggressively. A clear pattern of behavior was emerging, but the missing persons were often teenagers. Many of them considered runaways, which limited police's attention. Gacy was so under the radar, he even got a photograph with the First Lady Rosalind Carter in 1978 while volunteering with the local Democratic Party. And I believe it was for a Polish celebration or something. But pull that shit up for us, Jamie. We got a picture of Gacy with a Rosalind Carter. It should be right up there. Oh, yeah, it's nice and big. I like that. Yep, that's them. That's them together. Gosh, what a handsome one. She was the throat goat. Or wait, no, that was Nancy.
That was Nancy.
Nancy.
Nancy was the throat goat.
What did she do? Didn't she do something? Didn't she have scandalicious?
Couldn't tell you.
Not that I'm aware of.
Was she really good at foot jobs or something?
Yeah, yeah,
Look
yeah,
at those
she's more of
fucking
a-
yams,
That's
dude.
wild.
Can't even see her feet.
What the fuck?
Yeah,
You could tell. You could just tell.
she stepped on a lot of cakes.
All right, so he continued a pattern of abducting young boys that were, let's say, disadvantaged. As an added layer of frustration, during all of these parties that Gacy held, the house grew stinkier and stinkier by the week, clearly from the smell of decaying flesh in his crawl space. Now, there are so many instances of former associates of his complaining about the putrid smell, but because he had the party house and the drugs, the booze, and the pornos, that's where everyone continued to go. And it was at some of these parties where boys would disappear and never be seen alive again. So, guys, this went on for 6 full years. As we mentioned, his body count topped the 30s. He had confirmed 33 kills. It wasn't until Robert Peace disappeared in December 1978 that Gacy's crimes finally caught up with him. Peace was a 15-year-old honor student who'd vanished after telling his mother he was going to meet a man about a job. That man was Gacy. Police took the case seriously from the start, but that was all thanks to Robert Peace's family being extremely persistent that Gacy had something to do with his disappearance. Because there's one different thing about this case, was like this kid was an honor student, his parents gave a shit. And that's the one thing that separated the other 32 victims. The parents gave a shit. And that's a lesson for you guys out there you need to hear. And there you go. You have to be persistent. A background check revealed Gacy's prior conviction. Surveillance began and a search warrant was executed at his home. Though no bodies were found initially, items belonging to missing boys were discovered, including a class ring and many driver's licenses. The odor in Gacy's home, long dismissed as plumbing issues, was finally identified as the stench of decomp. On a second search, investigators entered the crawl space and discovered human remains. Gacy was arrested on December 21st, 1978. After his arrest, Gacy confessed to murdering 33 young men and boys, and this was following an initial, kind of a strange initial confession that came just earlier that month from a drunken fit where he showed up to his attorney's office late in a December evening, called his lawyer up for an emergency meeting, and just started spilling all the beans. And then he just passed out on the lawyer's couch. And when he came to, I think he had kind of understood what he had done, but maybe not fully. And that the lawyer didn't even really believe him. He's like, Gacy, what the hell are you talking about? Like, we all know you. He was holding local council seats as well. So this guy was woven into the community. He was almost, I would say, well liked by a majority of people. But yeah, when he had said all this stuff, they almost didn't believe him. But then the cops did confirm all of this stuff when they found the bodies. He'd said the murders were committed during drunken blackouts, similar to the ones are next on the list Dahmer had claimed to have. And he said he had a split personality, referring to his murderous side as Jack. Psychologists later diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder. At the 1980 trial, Gacy's defense tried to argue insanity, but overwhelming evidence, testimony, physical evidence, and his own confession led to a conviction on all 33 counts of murder. He was sentenced to death. As of today, 5 of Gacy's victims remain unidentified. The Cook County Sheriff Office continues to use DNA testing to match unidentified remains with families of missing persons. John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10th, 1994 at Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois, after spending 14 years on death row. The execution was briefly delayed due to a clog in the IV line, but he was pronounced dead at 12:58 a.m. Gacy was convicted of murdering 33 young men and boys between 72 and 78, the highest confirmed victim count for a single offender in U.S. history at that time. Of those 33 victims, 29 were discovered beneath his home and garage, 4 were recovered from the Des Plaines River, and 5 remain unidentified. The scale and brutality of his crimes shocked the nation and sparked legislative change. In particular, public outrage over Gacy's ability to sell his paintings and artwork while on death row contributed to strengthening the Son of Sam laws in Illinois and other states. These laws are designed to prevent convicted criminals from profiting off the publicity of their crimes, ensuring that any proceeds instead benefit victims' families or are seized by the states. After his death, much of Gacy's artwork, his disturbing clown self-portraits, which are you can still kind of find either clones of or people claiming to have the originals of on eBay, were destroyed or sold. The house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue was demolished and the address was changed to deter morbid tourism. And really quick, Gacy's last words were not "kiss my ass," as is generally accepted by the public. In fact, he said nothing. He said nothing. And I just want to clarify that right there, because that is all, you look over the is like wildfire on the internet. Yeah. Everybody seems to think that he said that, "kiss my ass" on the way out, but he said absolutely nothing. Although we do think that he did have KFC for his last meal, and I'm going to accept that as true. Yep. I need that to be true. It's like full circle, baby. It's full circle. And obviously he was an abused child. He had a rough go of it. But there are many people out there who make it through tough childhoods without becoming a closeted child killer. All right. So our last S tier pick for the night is, of course, Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. His body count was officially 17, and he was honest enough that I think it's accurate. I don't think there's any more or less than 17. And it might not be in the 30s like Gacy or Bundy, but it's still 17 ruined lives and the lives of 17 other families, 18 if you include his. Dahmer ripped through the Milwaukee gay scene completely uninhibited by the law in the 80s and 90s, often drugging men and taking them back to his apartment to brutally kill and dismember them. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. We're getting close to his birthday here. His early years were marked by instability and neglect. His mother suffered from mental health issues, including depression and anxiety, leading to frequent hospitalizations. His father, a chemist, was often absent due to work commitments. This lack of paternal attention contributed to Dahmer's feelings of isolation and abandonment. As a child, Dahmer exhibited a fascination with dead animals. He would collect roadkill and dissect the carcasses, storing the remains in jars. This morbid interest was encouraged by his father, who believed it was a scientific curiosity. However, it was an early indicator of Dahmer's disturbed psyche. He was also known to be shy and withdrawn, struggling to connect with his peers. In high school, Dahmer's behavior became increasingly erratic. He began drinking heavily, often consuming alcohol during school hours, and despite his substance abuse, he managed to graduate in 1978. I'm pretty sure you had to have a buzz on to graduate from a high school in Wisconsin in the 70s.
Yeah,
or the
sure. It's part of your fucking
it's like,
cap and gown.
They give you a fucking Miller Lite.
Yeah, you get credit for it. You get college credit.
Kid, are you drunk? What? No. Fuck, what are you doing? Here's a beer. Shortly after
Well, why
graduation.
the hell not?
Yeah, why the hell not? Shortly after graduation, his parents divorced and his mother moved out, leaving Dahmer alone in the family home. And here's a little discrepancy in the timeline. It was actually just before he graduated that I think they separated. I don't think they officially divorced his parents, but they had some kind of big argument, and they basically both left and just left him alone for the last 3 or so months of his senior year of high school. So he was just a 17-year-old living alone at home. And he was obviously already quite disturbed. And I did want to point out here that as we kind of round out his childhood, he was very obviously he was neglected. We know that for absolute certainty. But I don't think he was ever physically abused. And I'm not trying to say he was like justified. Like if he was hit, then he does get to kill people at that level.
Everyone
You get
knows
a
you get a
pass.
pass.
Yeah.
You get one body per smack.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think he was actually full on physically abused. However, I will say that his childhood was in a way abusive in the way that he was neglected emotionally. So both his parents were emotionally absent during the formative years of his life, which absolutely fucked him. But like we just concluded with Gacy, even the worst childhoods don't usually end with serial killers. It's usually a component to it, but there's a whole lot more to what makes a person become a serial killer. In fact, we will be doing a comprehensive dive on serial killers for our Patreon only called Serial Killers 101 that will cover common traits among them, terminology, and all sorts of stuff that will surely help improve your small talk at work or maybe at the bar trying to pick up ladies. Ew, this guy keeps talking to me about Jeffrey Dahmer. He won't leave me alone. Like, oh, and then he fucking fucked this guy's head. And then it's like,
He's so
drank his blood.
educated. He's so passionate.
When a boy shows you his special interest and it's fucking Dahmer, it's like, oh, and I've got this box here with a couple of dismembered heads in here if you want to take a look at that. So it was during this period of isolation that Dahmer committed his first murder. On June 18th, 1978, he picked up 18-year-old hitchhiker Stephen Hicks and invited him back to his house. After drinking together, Hicks attempted to leave, but Dahmer didn't want him to go. In a fit of rage, he struck Hicks with a dumbbell and then strangled him. He later dismembered the body and disposed of the remains. He even went back to the site years later after his military service, dug up the skeletal remains to smash them to bits with a sledgehammer just to really make sure there's nothing left. Which also kind of shows how conscious he was of exactly of what he was doing. And that he didn't want to get caught. He knew what he was doing was wrong. Dahmer himself admitted to having that exact fantasy for months leading up to this unfortunate run-in with Hicks. He had a very specific fantasy of hiding in a bush, whacking this runner in the head, and then taking him back to his house to use as an unconscious sex doll. He even attempted this one earlier time, but fell asleep in the bushes and the runner passed by unharmed. Yeah, this fucking drunk ass could hardly commit to being a predator. And that's why you cannot be day drinking, folks. You'll be passing out in the bush.
Your plans are gone.
Your plans
That's
are
true.
done.
It's true.
Following the murder, Dahmer enrolled at Ohio State University, but dropped out after one semester due to his alcoholism. In 1979, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and served as a medical specialist in Germany, which is kind of hilarious. However, his drinking problem persisted, leading to his discharge in 1981. And in fact, it was alcoholism plus being a sexual deviant that really got on the boot, as there's allegations that he sexually assaulted one of his bunkmates.
That was more the problem than anything.
That was probably more because everybody's an alcoholic.
Because they were, because they were like,
really the entire band of drunks.
You're too drunk for college. You considered killing people.
Right, exactly. I know that's literally how the military's whole fucking MO. And they're like, yeah, they send them home for being too drunk in the military. Yeah, bullshit. Wait,
you're gay? Oh, hell no.
That's probably more what it was.
Because we know they're fine with sexual assault, too.
Yeah, you know what? The more you say it, you're absolutely right. They are okay with sexual assaults.
Yeah.
You really fucking hit the nail on the head over there. Holy shit. After returning to the U.S., he lived with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin, near Milwaukee. His grandmother was a sweet old lady that was basically doing charity work for Lionel, as he was now with a new wife and didn't want to deal with Jeff, who was in his mid to late 20s and was clearly dealing with some serious mental issues. So fucking pawn him off on old grandma, no big deal. He held various jobs, including time as a phlebotomist at the Milwaukee Blood Plasma Center, yet another piece of ironic true crime history. This was until January 1985, where he got a job as a mixer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory. Fun fact, the last job he would hold during all of his crimes. His employment provided him with a stable income and a structured routine, which he desperately needed. Dahmer's interactions with the law enforcement during this time, however, were frequent. In 82, he was arrested for indecent exposure at the Wisconsin State Fair Park and fined 50 big ones. In 86, he was arrested for masturbating in front of 2 boys and received a 1-year probation sentence with counseling. And by the way, the boys did laugh at him. He whipped it out and started jerking it, and they're like, fucking idiot. In 88, Dahmer was convicted of second-degree sexual assault and enticing a child for immoral purposes after luring a 13-year-old boy to his home to take pictures of nude. Because that was his thing, by the way. He would lure people in by being like taken with their beauty. He's like, "Oh, you're so beautiful," and then requesting to do a photo shoot with them because he was a cameraman. He was sentenced to 1 year in a work release program and 5 years of probation. During his incarceration, he was allowed to continue working at Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, returning to the prison each night. It was sometime in September 1987 that Dahmer lures Stephen Tuomi, 24, to his hotel room, roofies him, and then passes out. The following morning, Jeff wakes to find Stephen's lifeless body lying beside him in bed, with a massive crushing wound to his chest. He had no memory of the murder, but quickly gathered supplies to begin dismembering the corpse and placing pieces of it in the trash. Stephen's skull was taken back with Jeff, where he boiled it in detergent and bleach to pulverize it later. And I love how, he does stick and move. Dahmer didn't even mean to kill this guy, yet second he wakes up and sees that it happened, he doesn't ask why, he doesn't wallow, he doesn't freak out. He's like, all right, let me go get my tools, I'll come back and I'll deal with this. So this guy, nothing stops him. Then, only a month later, in October, Dahmer lures 14-year-old James Dockstader to the basement of his grandmother's house. He promised him, again, $50 for nude photos, but instead, he drugged and strangled the boy and then dismembered his body. He does the same thing with Richard Guerrero in March of 1988, whom he had met outside of a Milwaukee gay bar. Again, drugging, strangling, and dismembering this man in his grandmother's basement. In September of 1988, his grandmother finally got annoyed with Jeffrey killing random men late in the night and forced him to move out, after which he is arrested and charged for the second-degree assault of Keeson Syntha. Oh, fuck.
Syntha
Somaphone, okay. He spent a week in jail, but was released on bail. A few months later, in March of 89, he drugs, strangles, and dismembers aspiring model Anthony Sears. He did this again in his grandmother's basement in fear of being caught in his own apartment. He also starts preserving trophies around this time, keeping Sears' head and genitals in a wooden box, which he sometimes brought to work with him at Ambrosia. Just casually.
What's in the box?
What's in the box? Sentenced to 12 months of jail time and 5 years of probation for second-degree sexual assault, Dahmer was permitted work release in order to keep his job as a mixer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, and also required to register as a sex offender. He was paroled from jail 2 months early, at which point Dahmer rented an apartment at 924 North 25th Street in Milwaukee, which is the infamous apartment that was tore down after these crimes were unveiled. May 1990, shortly after his release, Dahmer kills again. Just months after being released from jail, Dahmer killed Raymond Smith, a 32-year-old prostitute he had offered $50 for sex. He should start offering a little bit more if he's going to kill these people. After drugging Smith at his North 25th Street apartment, Dahmer strangled him with his hands before taking Polaroid pictures of the corpse in suggestive poses. Dismembering the body in the bathroom, Dahmer boiled the remains, dissolving them in a container of acid except for his skull, which he kept in a cabinet alongside Sears' skull. When neighbors complained of the smell emanating from the apartment, Dahmer would always tell them it was a refrigerator that was broken, he was waiting to get it fixed, or he had some tropical fish that died. He always had some kind of, I had a old refrigerator that kind of died, and the freezer was full of stuff. It was a chest freezer.
I feel like I would try to escalate it and make it more ridiculous every time.
In June 1990, Dahmer kills again and attempts to preserve the body. After killing 27-year-old Edward Smith, Dahmer attempted to retain the body by keeping it in a freezer for several months. The frozen corpse was eventually discarded, with Dahmer telling authorities he was upset he did not get to keep any of Smith's body parts due to degradation in the freezer. In September of 1990, Dahmer claims 2 more victims, but deviates from his previous methods. Ernest Miller, 22, had his throat slashed after being promised money to join Dahmer at his apartment. A lack of sleeping pills forced Dahmer to change his method of killing. Dahmer keeps these parts of Miller's body to eat, something that he just started doing, and he painted and displayed Miller's head in his apartments. I believe this is also when he starts painting the penises of his black victims white so he could suck on them and make it feel like he was sucking on a white penis instead of a black one, even though he was self-admittedly more attracted to black people. It's just a very strange thing, and I don't
Interesting.
really know which end to kind of go at it from.
Huh.
Yeah,
But
there's no right angle for
There's
that
no
one.
right angle. There's no good angle of attack there. 3 weeks later,
We're not
Dahmer
doing
killed...
Drake here.
We're not doing drink. Yeah, Mr. Remington. 3 weeks later, Dahmer killed 22-year-old David Thomas. Later, he said he came to realize during their encounter that he was just not attracted to him, but he still drugged and killed him, then disposed of his body, intentionally not keeping any parts because he was gross. Yeah, he wasn't cute enough to keep. In February 1991, a 10th victim is murdered. Dahmer picked up 17-year-old Curtis Strouder at a bus stop, offering him money in exchange for nude photos. Again, Dahmer continued his rituals with his 10th victim, offers of cash to a stranger, drugging, strangling, and dismembering the body, keeping parts for either trophies or cannibalism. And following his arrest, Dahmer said eating his victims was becoming a compulsion, making me feel like they were part of me. April 1991, Dahmer attempts to put a victim into a zombie-like state, as this has been his goal for the entire time. He wants a submissive, half-conscious person that he can do whatever he wants with. After drugging 19-year-old Earl Lindsay, Dahmer drilled a hole into his skull, into which he poured acid in an attempt to produce what Dahmer would describe as a zombie-like state in his victim. Lindsay regained consciousness before Dahmer drugged him further and then strangled him and flayed the corpse with the intention of retaining Lindsay's skin. In May, it's dead quiet in here now. Ooh.
Yeah, that's fucking heavy.
It's pretty
as
heavy.
It turns out.
May 1991, he narrowly escapes capture. Dahmer's next victim, 31-year-old Anthony Hughes, was dead, but still intact in the floor when he lured 14-year-old Conrad Synthosomophone to his North 25th Street apartment. And you might recognize that last name that I've butchered a million times. This is the brother of that kid. After photographing and drugging Conrad, Dahmer again tried to render his victim brain dead by drilling his skull and inserting acid, leaving the drugged body alongside Hughes' corpse while he left the apartment for a few hours. Probably had to run and get some beer and some cheese curds. Returning in the early hours of the following morning, Dahmer discovered a groggy Conrad sitting outside the apartment building with 3 women huddled around him. Telling the women that he was just his friend, his boyfriend, Dahmer attempted to lead the boy back in the apartment to the dismay of the woman, who informed Dahmer that they had already called the police. Now, if anybody has seen the show Monster with Dahmer, this scene plays out about as accurately in the show as it does in real life. I mean, this is about verbatim as it went.
Yeah.
Dahmer eventually did convince the police that he was just his 19-year-old boyfriend, and they were quarreling after drinking too much. And this was, of course, amid protest from the woman who was sitting there trying to tell the police that, no, this is just a boy. This is a boy. There's something not right here.
Mm-hmm.
Do not let them back. Do not let him back into this apartment with this man. Something bad is going to happen to him. And they just let him go. Just let him go back into Dahmer's apartment. Dahmer once again drilled Conrad's head and injected it with acid another time, this time with fatal results. By coincidence, he was, of course, as we mentioned, the younger brother of the boy Dahmer had molested in 1988, a crime for which he was convicted, although, according to Dahmer, he had no idea of their connection. After dismembering their bodies, Dahmer kept the skulls of both Hughes and Conrad. And for time's sake, we do need to skip ahead a bit to when Dahmer actually gets caught for realsies this time. 2 Milwaukee police officers were flagged down by an agitated man with handcuffs attached at one wrist. Tracy Edwards, 32, told the officers a freak had placed the handcuffs on him and that he had spent the better part of the evening trying to escape from a nearby apartment in which he was being held captive. Dahmer had met Edwards earlier that day and persuaded him to accompany him to his apartment. Upon entering, Edwards immediately noticed a foul smell and stacked boxes of hydrochloric acid. Dahmer had tried to place handcuffs on Edwards, succeeding only in fastening one wrist before he brandished a knife, pulling Edwards towards the bedroom where Dahmer said he intended to take nude pictures. Continually repeating he was Dahmer's friend, Edwards waited until his captor had a lapse of concentration, whereupon he punched Dahmer in the face, and in the confusion, Edwards fled through the front door, eventually flagging down the police car. Upon their arrival to the apartment, Dahmer invited the attending officers inside, admitting that he was the one who placed the handcuffs on Edwards and that the keys were in his nightstand. Upon entering the bedroom, one officer noticed a partially open drawer filled with Polaroid pictures of numerous bodies in different stages of dismemberment. Brandishing the images, the officer returned to the living room, reportedly saying to the partner, "These are for real." Seeing the images, Dahmer attempted to escape, but was quickly subdued by police, who immediately called for assistance. When authorities opened Dahmer's refrigerator door, they found the severed head of a black male on the bottom shelf. Authorities would discover 4 other severed heads in Dahmer's kitchen, 2 human hearts in the refrigerator, 7 skulls in Dahmer's bedroom, as well as an entire human torso in the freezer. Further investigations at the apartment would reveal preserved sexual organs, 2 entire skeletons, severed hands, and a further 3 torsos submerged in acid. Asked following his arrest if he was glad it was over, Dahmer stated he was not glad, like he liked his lifestyle and found it exciting and thrilling. When authorities asked Dahmer if it would be possible to lead a normal life if he were ever released, the murderer responded that the best place for him was prison, because if he ever got out, he would go right back to the same behavior, including killing. Sentenced to 16 consecutive life terms, Dahmer was killed by a fellow prison inmate, Christopher Scarver, in 1994. So that's everything that I had on Dahmer. I do have a lot of, he takes up a lot of room in this noggin here. I do have a lot of other things that we could
there's
probably.
so much about him.
There's so much about him that you, again, I kind of don't know what angle. There's this notorious big blue drum of this hydrochloric acid that they took out of the apartment.
Yeah.
Some of those drums did feature the corpses actually in there in that process of putrefaction. So that apartment had to have smelled like absolute dead butthole.
Yeah.
I've never
Here,
seen
Because
this.
hydrochloric acid is just.
I've never seen this
acid,
picture
so,
of him
like,
before, and
that's-
this is terrifying.
Yeah, let's go ahead and that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, I've never seen that one.
I think that's from his arrest. What's the date on that? Say at the bottom. 81.
yeah,
So that's
81.
that's early on. That's when he got arrested for, I think, masturbating in the park in front of those kids.
Gotcha.
So
I
That's
did
the
find
face of a man who would masterbate. in a
yeah,
park.
look at that
Yeah.
smirk.
Look at
Dude. He's like
him,
he was
yeah.
satisfied with himself. He
This
was
is-
very satisfied with himself.
This is his freezer that they were taking down. And then
Yeah,
yep.
The notorious blue drum. And just a couple quick things. So the people on site said that this left them permanent psychological scars.
Well, yeah.
Like they said that this was
this
the
is
worst. This
traumatizing.
traumatized all the people that like most of the people that responded to the scene. Yeah, that's. I'm
There's
sorry. I'm just
just-
looking. I'm looking
no,
with
yeah.
Because this is the
interesting.
media that we grew up with is based on.
Yep.
Not even
Yeah.
media. Like this is like
I mean,
like we grew up with the like idea of this and these
that
events
was already
being-
happening.
Exactly.
It's already happened. Whereas when you
Where-
were these people were just watching this happen basically for the first time. I mean,
Yeah,
as,
it was
apart
like-
from Gein, it's
Well,
like
yeah, especially being like somebody who's like responding to the scene. Yeah, because like this.
yeah, you have no frame of reference. You just
you
walk
are
into
not
this.
inoculated in any way, shape, or form. You
No,
have
Showtime
no-
wasn't around yet.
yeah.
We didn't have this shit. The other thing I did want to mention was that the officers that did respond, they kind of talked about how the remains were set up, that it was some kind of like a museum. They're like, oh, we almost felt bad taking the stuff down because it seemed like some kind of museum. I mean, he had this very nice leather-bound armchair that he would sit and drink in front of, and instead of like having a TV like any fucking normal human being would have, he had the display case of all the skulls and all this shit up there, and different bones and body parts and jars, and it was like a very curated, very carefully curated little personal museum for Jeffrey Dahmer.
Crazy.
Yep, crazy awesome, right? Just kidding. That's fucking horrible. That was probably one of the heavier things that we've had to cover on here. Again, like you were just saying, it's almost hard to have a frame of reference for how a monster like this could really
It's
be a real person.
It's like incomprehensible.
And there's a huge race, a very big race component to this case as well, because he
absolutely.
lived and operated in a primarily black neighborhood. And they did ask him, they're like, look, Jeffrey, are you killing these people because they're black? And that's where he's like, no, I'm attracted more to black people. It's like, that's really it. So if you had the unfortunate,
Well, I mean, so he is technically killing them because they're black. Then
so it is still racist
Technically,
killing.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
still-
like-
he
like-
just likes their race a lot, but he's still killing them more.
are you killing these people because they're black?
and
And,
he-
he's
well, he
like,
had a-
no, I just like them because they're black. It's like, okay, well, so
But it's still because
so
I
it's
can't
'cause
be
they're
racist
black.
if I like their race. Is kind of he used the Jerry Seinfeld defense. But I mean, he was very attracted to torsos specifically. He likes people's torsos, and
It's like my least favorite sign.
shut up. Oh, my, shut the fuck up.
Son
So if that's all, is that everybody has for thoughts on Dahmer? Anything you want to wrap up here?
Classic fucking Gemini.
Classic.
Classic. I just want to say there need to be more good Jeffreys.
No,
I mean,
I think we've got a good amount.
because
right now.
there's too many bad Jeffries.
You've got Jeffrey.
Name one more.
Epstein,
Oof, that's a bad one.
Bezos.
Yep, those are too bad.
Oh man.
What about wait? I've got one for you. You ready?
Yeah, what's that?
Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Okay, all right.
I love Jeffrey Dean Morgan. We love Jeffrey Dean Morgan
Dude,
in this house.
you know what? He was in Shameless. I was watching.
Was he in an episode?
Yeah,
Really?
he was featured in an episode as a diner. He owned a diner.
He that doesn't surprise me. He's been in a lot of shit over the past 20 years. He's kind of like one of those Pedro Pascal sleeper
Yeah.
actors that he's been acting for fucking 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
It's just now you're seeing him in everything. So I just want to say, everybody, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you guys want the part 3, which is the conclusion of our S tier series here for American Psychos, that will be available on Patreon only. So if you want to hear about our next round of the biggest, baddest, scariest serial killers in American history, then you will have to pay us money. It's only $5 a month. We already have exclusive content on there. We have our vaulted content, our old stuff. We've got our Discord link so you can come and hang out with us. We've already got all sorts of stuff going on there. I do want to give a special shout out to our current Patreon members, which we have 2.
Oh,
now.
who's our
We
second
do have
one?
2.
Ooh, we have 2 now.
It was Steven something.
Okay, cool.
I don't.
Seagal?
Yes, I think Steven Seagal is now a Patreon member. No,
Oh,
so
yeah.
shout out to our Patreon members. We got Zach Ajulia, and then we got Steven out there. I'm sorry if I didn't get your last name in there. I will get it for next time. But at the end of every main episode, we will shout you guys out for being a part of it as well.
That's fucking awesome, man.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much. We love you. We miss you, and we're gonna be back. I do have another announcement. I kind of put it on the Patreon, but Jeff Lee and I, with our news episodes, we started doing them again. We realized that we kind of wanted to do something better with them. We want to do something more fun, more outrageous. So we are kind of retooling in that, and we're workshopping it. And I think we'll probably have it ready by June to start shooting those again. And so we will be back to our 2-week, two episodes a week upload. You guys have a wonderful night. We love you. Good night.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Okay,
Love you.
Goodbye.
What kind of drill bit did you use to drill into the heads of your victims?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
a special
that's
interest.
a-
It's Milwaukee fucking drill bits.
Oh, I only buy Milwaukee. It's really the only brand
It's
you
got
can
the
trust
lifetime
nowadays.
guarantee on there too.
Yeah.
So.
It really does. I broke one the other day on this little Filipino boy.
And they returned it, no
They
question.
returned it, no questions
There's even a
asked.
little blood on there, but they didn't
Yeah.
even ask no questions about it.
No.
They just gave me a new one and said, "Have a nice day, Mr. Now." After which he is arrested and charged for the 2nd-degree assault of Keeson fuck.
Synthosomophone.
Synthesomophone. Okay. After which he After which he is arrested and charged for the 2nd-degree assault of Keeson After which he was arrested and charged. Oh my God. After which he is arrested and charged for the 2nd-degree assault of Keeson Synthomosophone.
I want so desperately for this to stay in. I don't think you understand.
Let's say we'll just call him Keeson Synthosomophone. Keeson Synthosomophone. Synthosomophone. Keeson Synthosomophone. Whom
By
he
Jove,
drugged.
I think he's got it.
Did you enjoy this episode? Then check out more at 999.network, Mid-Michigan's premier podcast network.